we will move on to our next paper written by Professor Dr. Pınar Özdemir and Professor Dr. Melike AKTAŞ and Professor Dr. Senem GENÇTÜRK HIZAL and Research Assistant Nilüfer Pınar KILIÇ. Their paper is called Risk Communication with Vulnerable Politics, Experiences of Turkish Older Adults During COVID-19 Pandemic. Professor Dr. Pınar Özdemir will be presenting their paper. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Now we will be listening to you.
Okay, hello everyone. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank the organization committee for this amazing symposium. Today I'm going to present our paper titled Risk Communication with Vulnerable Publics, Experiences of Turkish Older Adults During COVID-19 Pandemic. Indeed, these are some of the results of a completed project funded by TÜBİTAK, the Scientific and Technological Research Council of Turkey. Our project coordinator is Melike AKTAŞ from Ankara University. Me and my colleague Nilüfer Pınar KILIÇ were also from Ankara University. And our third member is Senem GENÇTÜRK HIZAL, is a member of Başkent University. Indeed, my friends are here with us in the room, so if you ask some questions, I think they can collaborate as well to answer. As we have limited time, I will skip the theoretical framework and proceed directly to our research. Do you see the slide? I changed it. Okay, perfect. As you know, World Health Organization and Center for Disease Control and Prevention, older adults have been positioned as the risk group and defined vulnerable since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic. This discourse caused the adaptation of the idea that older adults are susceptible to the disease. Different governments in different parts of the world also adopted this policy. In this context, it is argued that the restrictive measures were taken to protect them. The protect is in quotations, of course. Lockdown measures were taken on March 21st, 2020 for those who were above 65 years old, 10 days after the first case in Turkey. The first lockdown lasted 44 days. After this period, the measures were loosened and authorities exempted them from the lockdown for 4 hours per day. Although the measures were taken as a part of the pandemic management in Turkey and different countries, the fact that framing the COVID-19 as an infectious disease affecting mainly older adults and acceptance of all older adults as a social homogeneously vulnerable group led them to be exposed to ageism, sexism, loneliness, social isolation, dependency, and elder abuse. These also determined the nature of the communication established with them during the pandemic management and shaped their experiences about it. As we know, communication during the pandemics developed the public awareness about the disease, creates a response for obtainment and seeking of information, and finally helps the public to take and adopt preventive measures. Public health organizations benefit from those communication strategies to take preventive measures to reduce and mitigate the impact while restricting the spread of the pandemic as they implement for treatment and recovery processes. In the literature on the structuring of effective risk communication process and its content, it is emphasized that the communication structure should be formed by overseeing the public and taking their perspective as a basis. Another aim of the study is to help the older adults to make their voice opinions heard, which haven't been heard during the decision-making process in pandemic management, and to conceive the experiences to draw a roadmap for better communication practices in a future pandemic. Before starting our research, we had obtained an IRB approval from Ankara University Ethics Committee. Our study included only one person from the same family, and we paid attention to have a gender distribution balance among participants and accepted those who reside in different districts of Ankara. We reached our interviewees via personal references and over their connections with the help of snowball technique. Our study was limited to the citizens living in various districts of Ankara, and interviews were, there were 47 participants. 22 of them were men and 25 of them were women between the ages of 65 to 89, and they all had different educational backgrounds. When it was time for data collection, we conducted semi-structured telephone interviews between August 2020 to December 2020. We asked questions under two main parts, and first our questions were about the demography, and under the second part we asked 30 semi-structured questions about the different things like knowledge about the COVID-19 pandemic, the measures they have been taking for protection, their opinions on risk measures, communication of these measures to them, their vulnerability, their experiences, their communication needs, and their expectations. Each interview lasted between 30 minutes to 45 minutes as it was on phone. It was not like face-to-face, so it was a struggle indeed doing these interviews via phone. To analyze the data, we truly went through the transcription of the voice records and defined the beginning codes for the data throughout the text. And as a second step, we created double groups. We teamed up and listed the teams using the beginning codes. Then we made a comparison between the teams we have founded as different groups, and after analysis, teams are highlighted and defined by associations and combinations between codes. During axial coding, which is connected to the team list, data codes and teams are reviewed on the basic concept is a set. And finally, we analyzed again based on the defined themes. And our findings, I think it is the most exciting part of our research because it really took too much time and took much effort for us. Our findings indicate that older adults' definition of the coronavirus matched that of the mass media. Older adults watch television and benefit from the internet to meet the information needs during the pandemic. Besides, as they both have started to spend more time at home and their information needs have increased, the frequency of using communication tools have increased as well. It may be argued that the need for communication via social media platforms puts pressure on older adults to improve some digital skills that they haven't improved before. The findings also indicate that the participants have a leaning to trust in specialist physicians, family physicians, and non-governmental medical organizations to cope with the infodemic and the uncertainties. And this is important because these findings overlap with the results of other studies which are conducted in different parts of the world. It can also be argued that communication relation of the older adults with their reference circle also shaped the nature of their relations with COVID-19 pandemic. Our findings point out that during this pandemic period, the older adults mostly have contacted their families and friends via phone calls, and they have had a conversation regarding issues such as death toll, news about the pandemic, the precautions to be taken. This form of interpersonal communication also functioned as a solidarity mechanism during the pandemic to compensate losses, grief, and other needs. Our participants commented that they do not go out from home unless it is necessary. But still, they were subjected to the restrictions based on their age group, makes it harder to fulfill their essential needs. Also, although they can take their precautions and implement them. Participants emphasized that especially their immediate family members as well as their neighbors support them to meet their needs. Living alone, being distant from the family and relatives, or not having a supporting close person during the pandemic has made it even harder to fulfill the needs of such older adults. The level of economic capital was also an important issue because it shaped how you experience this pandemic. The participants associate the restrictions with poverty, which is a detrimental factor for vulnerability. They most of all criticize restrictions as not all adults above 65 have the same economic opportunities. Also, the older adults which we have interviews emphasized that during the pandemic, they needed to postpone their routine health checks or experience interruptions in various preventive health services. This increased the risk of worsening of their health due to diabetes, heart diseases, and other which are not related to COVID-19 pandemic. Besides, the participants state that they experience psychological problems due to the immobility during the lockdown period. Usually we think that so elder adults doesn't have a very active life, but contrary to this popular opinion about older adults, they are really having quite a social life before the pandemic. However, the conditions under the pandemic prevent them from any opportunity for socializing. Avoiding the active social life also became a source of sadness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Under the condition of the COVID-19 pandemic, older adults severely experienced the psychological results of not meeting and physical contact with their close circles. I think you can define this pandemic as an invisible human rights crisis for older adults because they were marginalized, and this marginalization is reflected in the statements of the participants. They explained that although they have been declared as scapegoats, they are the ones who obey the rules, but younger populations are more careless and restrictions should cover every citizen equally. For our concluding remarks, after our research, we understood once again that there is a need to give priority to qualitative research on the studies for older adults. Although in the literature there are discussions around different contexts of ageism, stigmas, and human rights crisis, older adults' voices are widely not heard. Our study analyzing the experiences of the older adults in Turkey finds that the protective measures during the pandemic can damage their psychological, social, and physical well-being and increase their already current vulnerabilities. Accordingly, older adults whose experiences vary from one another during the pandemic shouldn't be considered as a homogeneous group as defined in relevant literature. Their psychological, social, and physiological conditions should be taken into consideration as well. We advise that all actors forming the pandemic discourse and being from the political power to the media should hear the voice of older adults and avoid using expressions that may lead to marginalizing and discriminating them in pandemic management. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Now we are a little bit short on time, so I will move on to the next paper. The next paper